Virtually all the stages for finishing off the flesh now. So I'll do the whites, and then probably I'll put a wash of Italian warm ochre over just to show you the effects of that. Then I'll put washes of red and define the lines and do the eyes. So. Probably a bit much to take all in one go, but I'll do it anyway. So at this stage, I've got one more blended layer of highlighting to do, and then the final white highlights. See if that's right. So as I mentioned earlier, you use what I call the snow as a guideline where the high points are, but you're not doing the snow. So the snow's there, so you're developing perhaps about 50% more than where the snow is, but that gives you an idea where the high points are. So here the high point is round there, that's the concentration there to the left. If I brought it too far over, that would be wrong, because here it's concentrated there. So really you're doing what you did before, but over a smaller area. And don't worry too much if you just feel the whole thing's getting too white. That can be work to your advantage, because with the glaze of the Italian warm ochre, we'll sort of tone it down and unite it. And it'll have a lovely glow to it. I think I'd suggest to all of you doing the Kievan one that you deliberately make it a bit too light, so that the Italian warm ochre will give it a great glow. As before, I have two mixes, a medium and a dilute mix, and a perfectly clean glaze, so if you need to, you can blend the edge. Some of you have been applying it too wet, and that's quite a big danger really. You can have it quite watered down, but don't have your brush wet. That's when you'll start poking holes in. Because this is a slightly more opaque and whiter mix, you can do final adjustments. So for example, if you find that this line here is too far down, you can push it up a bit. Like, let's just say that line came down like that, you can push it back a bit, because this is a more opaque layer we're putting on, or at least whiter. There's a bit of a distinction between that and that, isn't there? So you can begin to indicate that now. Look back on what you've painted after a minute or two and see if, having dried, it's light enough. I think that's all right. Everything goes a bit darker, doesn't it, when it dries? The white goes dark when it dries. I don't think that's light enough. There are some icons like the Sinai encaustic Christ, which is, well, it's painted in caustic, so it's more like an oil paint, quite impasto. So you can, toward the end, when you do your final highlights, really have quite distinct, quite strong highlights. But whatever you do, don't be fooled by the snow. You always got to spread out further than the snow. Don't concentrate your forms too early. Make sure your cheekbones are broad. A lot of people bring this up to like that, so the cheekbone becomes too squashed in. So if you haven't got that, you can at this stage bring it out a bit. What I'll probably do is after I've done this penultimate highlighting, I'll give it a wash of Italian Mocha, and then we'll put the highlights in and then do the washes with red. Well, it's more like an orange really. I like to go over it again. Even though we're making these distinct, if it becomes a bit too separate with a dry brush, you can just bridge it a little bit. So all the time you're looking for this distinction but unity.
Otherwise, are you covering the same area or slightly
Smaller,
less?
yeah. Each highlight is less of an area. Though, as I said, if you've discovered a mistake with your previous highlighting, then use this to correct it. Watch out for the shading on the nose. They're normally not, the width of the shading isn't the same, as if it's turned, one side will be a bit lighter than the other, or the shadow less than the other. While it's drying, I'll mix up some Italian Mocha. Really ought to be left a bit before I put it on, but I think I can get away with putting a glaze on. It'd be better for you not to put the glaze on until you've left it for about half an hour, just to make sure you don't bleed anything. And I could get away without doing the glaze on this because I'll be putting the reds in and the greens in. Perhaps I won't, I'll just demonstrate with someone else's who needs to have it done. Otherwise, if I do that, I think on this it would be a bit too low key. So what I do then is put the reds in. So make sure you haven't got any white in your brush because you don't want this pink, you want it an orange. You can use English light red and bright yellow ochre, but it's probably better to use a vermilion and yellow ochre, just a bit richer then.
So this is for the...
all the sort of, I don't know what you call them, the warming ups, you see where we put them.
Sorry, could you say the colours again? It was...
Well, you use vermilion and yellow ochre bright for this. I did say in some situations you can use English light red and yellow ochre. It won't be as brilliant, of course, but when I'm doing fresco painting, I've got to use the earth colours. The vermilion doesn't stand up to fresco. Something like that. Perhaps a little bit redder. Yeah, whatever you do, keep it dilute. Don't make it opaque. You can always build up opacity, but you can't take it off if it isn't right. So depends on your icon, but these, what I'm doing now, are the common places. The upper eyelid there, the crease rather, the upper eyelid. Some icons have two, they don't have the crease. What they do is they have two lines on the lid, and not the crease. And one or two of you I saw got an icon like that. I forget which one it is. So now we do one side of the nose. We'll reinforce these with shadow. With one side of the nose, you see, it's got that sort of warm glow. It's an icon by Theophan the Greek, which has got really, these are in the Sobor Cathedral in Moscow, really strong vermilion on the nose. And then the tear gland. Can be a good idea to, if the whole lot looks a bit too white to you, instead of jumping in and putting a glaze on, do these bits of red, and that can sometimes be sufficient to warm the whole thing up, because your eye mixes the red and the white and sort of creates a more of an orange effect, even though they're separate in the painting. I think I mentioned to you, I find it generally best to carry the flesh right through the lip, and then you can put a touch of white to the bottom lip if you like. Put the red into the bottom, and not necessarily right over it, sort of in this case just to the right, but leave the flesh to the left.
Is that the only colour that you would put on the mouth?
Yeah. That's the only colour I put on, but I mean, if you've got other ideas, do it.
Well, I meant in terms of there isn't anything else
Well,
that you would...
well, there are other things we're going to do inside there, at the end, and through the middle where the lips meet. You see, it's not going through the whole of the upper lip. You want the end here in a bit of shadow. If you fill the whole lot with red, you lose the shadow. So leave some of your shadow at the end. I'll leave that settle and come back to it. So the ear has a bit of red as well. It's all the organs of sensing particularly that have a bit of red.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest to do is the glow on the cheeks. They can be. So I'll do that now. So really watered down. And to think of it as a stain, just build up a stain rather than a paint layer. Now, this is where it really comes alive. Get a bigger brush and semi-dilute. I use this now on some of the shadows. So it's turning this way. I'm going to have the left side a bit more red. So I'm using this as a form of shadow.
Side, yeah?
The closer side, yeah. So I'm going to use this as more of a shadow. Then the other side I'm going to bring green in. Here as well. Depends on your icon, but basically in the interface of the shadow and the flesh, just put a wash of that. You can adjust. So let's just say you've lost your shadow here. You can bring this red down a bit. I'll put a little bit here. If I'm going to use green there, I'll also bring that in a bit there. Just a little bit. As it dries, you can fine tune. Even though I'm going to have green down there, I'll put a bit of red on the cheek there. Learn how to use the fan of your brush. See, it's fanned out. Just a really light touch. One or two of you got an icon where you got some little dots there as a form of shadow. I don't know if it works on this one, I'll probably take them off. Yeah, now I'll do the darker lines now. So probably you could use a red rather than a varna, but here I think we're using a varna with a touch of black. These are for the lines, hardly any black. You can always darken, but you can't lighten. So sort of greeny. I might have a smidgen of red. So some people use burnt sienna for these lines, but it's quite a strong pigment, so you've got to be a bit careful.
So what do you have there again?
So this particular mix I've got is a varna, black, and just a touch of English light red. You want something with a bit of warmth in it, hence the red, in something that's a bit darker than your shadow area. Okay, so the upper lid here is done. Eventually have an almost black there, but if you go straight into the black, it's a bit of a jump. So we're going to do an upper lid. You want to make the upper lid too thin. It's really quite mottled, so your first layer should be quite thick like that. Then we'll go over that again with the darker version. So you'll see the close up here somewhere. You can see the red. See the red poking out underneath the black?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we do now, that, little bits here and there. What we do will depend on your icon. See where your exercises help, giving a calligraphic line, good point.
Is this actually the eyelash line you're doing?
Yeah, it's not the eyelashes, but yeah, the upper lid. The bottom lid is always lighter than the top, so a bit of a washed out version of that.
And then you put a darker on top.
On top, and almost black. Yeah, just to change your icon, but
So this is
a darker version.
defining
On the top.
before the
On the top, not the bottom. Yeah. We put the red in there, but we also need a browner line on the outside of the nose.
On the outside line.
Yeah. Having put that in, you may need to go over the red again and go further inside of the red. Sometimes you can use this to actually increase the shadow depth in a very controlled way in certain places. Sometimes you fill that in, you might need to fill that in a bit there. You might need to adjust the brow a bit. The tendency is for people to go too far with the brow, so it's more likely you've got to take something off the brow rather than add, but if you do need to add, you can use this. Inside the ear, perhaps, you need to define that a bit better or something. Inside the inside the mouth, where the lips meet. Don't make that. It's got to be quite thin, but not too dark. We've done really carefully. A lot of the expression, of course, is in the lip. So get yourself a nice.
Yeah, you've got green in there.
No, just a varna, black and red still.
Red ochre.
Yeah, English light red. Yeah. See, we're doing that there. The various shapes of mouths, but most of them have a combination of that, a dip, and that. Some are flattened out, but they've all got those three forms to one extent or another. Slight swelling at the end. My moustache needs to come down a little bit to meet the mouth. I like to distant the end of the nose, darken that a bit. mix up the iris, the iris, and then I'll go back and put the blacks in. So the iris is sort of a chestnutty colour, so I'll add a bit of red in, red and black effectively, not too red, but
Ochre. Red.
red, okay, yeah. Let's put too much black in. Now this is, you've got to really be careful doing the iris. You need to watch a number of things. How much is chopped off? You never have all the iris showing. You never have that. That was too steely, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you don't want a lot of it covered like that. Looks as though they're going to die. Sort of rolling back, so that's wrong. So you want approximately about 10% of the iris cut off. Roughly about that much. See how it comes in? If it doesn't come in, then you know it's too far, so it's got to come in a bit, but still be chopped off. Of course, where you put it in the eye depends on where you want them to look. In that tiny iris, we've got to get 4 different things, so requires a bit of attention to detail. Don't make it too big either. Father Gregory Krug managed to get out with enormous irises and enormous pupils without them being scary, but they do look lovely. Mm. Okay, now you look. What do you notice around the pupil itself? Is the iris all a uniform colour, or are there differences?
That one's lighter underneath.
Yeah, it gets lighter as it goes toward the pupil. So in this case, that's actually light enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of black and go around the outside. Normally, the iris that I make is dark, and then I need to put a light in around there. But in this case, the iris is dried a bit light, so I'll go the other way and put a darker ring around.
I think.
So now we'll mix up a pure black and just add a smidgen of something else to it just to break the black, but it's pretty strong black. Take most of it off, and we're going to put this little bit in here. That gives a slight touch of a smile without it being cheesy.
Yeah, pure black.
Well, 9% pure black, if that's not a contradiction. So the end of the lip, the shapes vary. Sometimes they're like that. This is the shape of the end here. Sometimes they're more like that, but it swells up at the end. You can see that one there. Just a slight, starting very sharp, then swelling a bit. Then a little dot under the nostrils. And then your pupil. Because half a bit of the iris is covered, you'll have to have the pupil slightly, don't put it in the middle, it's got to go up a little bit. Okay, now we'll, with a really nice pointy thin brush, we'll put the upper eyelid in. This should be a little bit smaller, a bit thinner than the one you put on first, assuming you've done that thick enough. It's difficult to do well, so I suggest you do lots of practices on paper before you get in. So it's got to start sharp, get a bit thick, and then get thin again. And don't lose the shape. We've talked a lot about, so this one here rises more quickly. A third of the way across it's at its highest point, then it comes down, but it's not a big concave. Some of you have dropped that down too much, so it looks as though it's had a stroke. So in general, though, the high point is about a third of the way along. Not all the time, but that's the average shape. Something like that. Done very well, that one. And the lips here, you see how this here, it's sort of part of that shadow in a way. So I'm going to get some of that black and do that lower line on the moustache. I might put a little bit of the darker here on your lower eyelash. If perchance you find your black's too black, then you can just put a tiny bit of yellow ochre on it. So the red's toned down a bit now, so you can, if you've still got your mix, go back, perhaps even add a touch of red in, if necessary. And now I'm going to put the final highlights in. So that would have covered all, oh no, I've got to put the whites of the eyes in. That would have covered all the main processes, and then you just keep going backwards and forwards and tweaking and adjusting the comparative intensities of everything. So that upper lip is a bit pink, so I'll put some red in.
What about the whites of the eyes?
I'm going to do that now. Yeah, just wanted all that to settle. Put a bit more red here.
Can I ask, the upper lip was just highlighted before this stage?
The what was that?
I missed the upper lip.
Upper lip.
It was just highlighted before this stage.
No, no highlighting. It's
No.
just all, the upper lip's all shadow.
The pink,
We already had the pink.
but
Just
not
just
right
add
at the
it
edge.
in more.
The lower lip has a bit of white in it, the upper lip doesn't. Okay, so now I'm going to do the whites of the eye. So that's raw umber, which I need to get from a little box. Could you get the raw umber from that box for me, please? There it is, the front one.
Lots of things to remember. Do you have it written down, which
Yeah.
colours for which stage? And
Yeah,
Is it in your book?
yeah. So raw umber and white for the whites of the eye. Now the white of the eye, think of, it's really important that you've washed your shadow through. In other words, the white should be dark to begin with. So his head's turning that way, and if I'm to look at me, I've got to push the eyes this way a bit. So if you want his eyes to look to the left, you put more of the highlight on the right. Okay. See, there's more highlight on the right than on the left. That pushes his eye to the left. So if I'm like that, and I've got to look that way, so I put the whites on that side, that pushes them over. So that's done in two stages. First of all, your umber and white, and it's a sort of a crescent shape. That's a bit too dark. So you can see there that greyish colour. That's when I'm doing eye. Then later we put almost a pure white in. But you must have it semi-translucent, and you must leave some of the shadow, so you're not filling the whole eye. If you fill the whole eye, it looks a bit sort of scary and freaky. If you've got the wrong shape for your iris, you can adjust it a bit, because these are, especially the white, has reasonably good coverage. So you can fine-tune the shape of your iris at this point. It does come on the other side a little bit, but most of it is there. See that? Okay. Now I'd get a pure white and put a crescent. If you've got enough space, you can put 2 crescents in, a big one and a small one. Yeah, probably got room just for one. So thin, thick, thin. The danger of having too much pigment on, you've got control. So now I'll mix up more pure pigment, then I'll put the final highlights in, and you're well on the way to completion there. Let's clean that up there. Now how white this is depends very much on the tenure of your whole work. The key icon won't need any white highlights at all, it's all much lower key. Now these whites now need to be done really calligraphically. I think even though they do relate to the modelling, in other words on the points closest to us, the very calligraphic nature without blending to me indicates that it's more like the uncreated light of God shining out. So it's sort of related to the form. It's related to the form, but it's really uncreated light rather than created light. So it needs to be done very well and give it as calligraphy rather than modelling. You need a brush that has got enough of a belly. So you want to, most of the shapes you're going to make will actually be thin and thick like that. Right. So you need enough of the belly to have a width. Some, like above the eye, will be thin, thick, thin, like that. And they come in groups, but they're never the same length. So under the eye here, there might be something like that, but each one getting a bit smaller, or another one might be smaller and closer, but you're never getting the same length, like that. Okay, so we'll do this one here. Move the icon around. See, when you're moving like that, you create a curve that way, don't you? So if I want to curve that way, I wouldn't try to do it that way. So move the icon around. So a curve is a natural state. So if you're having a highlight there, don't bring it right up against the brow, because you go straight from the darkest to the lightest, so you'd have a bit of a gap there. The highlight's more toward the left, isn't it? So it's a bit too,
What size brush are you using?
I'll add a touch of yellow to that, and it's going to dry lighter, but or not less white. This is the 1. And a smidgen of yellow there.
Is this sable or synthetic?
Sable, yeah.
Yeah.
Synthetic will never get that point. If you want to avoid it, you can do these 2 or 3 times, but I prefer you to have to do it 2 or 3 times to get the coverage than have the paint so thick that it sort of stands on top of the paint layer below and doesn't let it come through. So it shouldn't sort of stand on top of something completely foreign. The strongest lights are on the nose and under the eyes. That's where the strongest are.
Are these the ones you call the snow?
Yeah. These are concave very often here. That's a bit clumsy. colours, you know. Whatever you do, don't let these get wiry. You know, they always think of triangles, not sort of wiry lines. Normally around the nostril. Again, any organs of reception tend to be given emphasis in an icon because the saint is a contemplator of heaven, a smeller of the fragrance of heaven. Not a lot around the lips, just a little bit around here perhaps. The ear's important, so 2 good highlights there. Depending on a whole lot of things, you may find that it all sort of dries a bit too light. Generally not there. You might put a smidgen down here, but generally not on the chin. Now another area, this whole thing of distinction and unity. What do you notice about? I've got it there. Yeah. What do you notice about highlighting outside and inside the eye around there? Can anyone see something interesting?
Goes inside.
It goes inside. See that? That wouldn't happen in nature, but it happens here. That's a way of, between there and there is distinction. You move there and there's unity. Doesn't happen on both sides, just on one, normally with the tear glanders. Sometimes what I do is on a larger icon, having I've faded out that one. That's rather. This one got the other one about. That's rather overexposed.
Can I take a picture while you're
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I put those in and they might have faded a bit light, so I think I did it. So then I've done them twice, and the first lot were longer and the second lot were whiter. So you can actually do that in 2 stages sometimes. Good, well that's not completed yet, but it's getting closer. So I'll just keep fiddling around. I'll probably add more green around there to get a contrast of red and green.
And green, what kind of green did you do?
Terravert and yellow again, I think. Yeah. I'm not saying all of you to do it, but it's one of the possibilities. If they're black there is a little bit foreign to the rest, so I just put a smidgen of yellow over the top. So it's still dark, but not quite so stark. Could do with a bit of delineating the ear a bit more. A bit on the hair perhaps. We establish a bit of the red on the nose.
And do you put in these 3 little hairs at the top?
Yeah, you can
At the end?
do that now if you like, yeah. Make them calligraphic, don't do them too tentatively. If you have them, it's a good idea to reinforce them with a little bit of highlighting, or have the highlighting, see the highlighting follows them. Everything should be in relationship, even if it's not something in nature would be related. Like there's no reason the highlight should be in the direction of the hair. The hair is quite distinct from the flesh, but it's nice if, and gentlemanly if one thing acknowledges the presence of the other. That's a bit too dark, that, so put a bit of yellow over it. Okay, any questions? So basically, yellow and a bit more white, slightly smaller than what you've got, and then almost a pure white for these highlights, making sure they're thin, thick, thin, or thin, thick. Add a touch of white to that white perhaps. Then washes of red, which is vermilion and yellow, in the places indicated. The eye white is umber and white, semi-translucent, then pure white. I'll put in pure white there, the whites, as is its once, it's sort of lost its whiteness a bit. For the iris, chestnut, and then a lighter chestnut around the pupil. The pupil almost a pure black. The upper eyelid there, do it first with a sort of a chestnut, and then a smaller version of it with a more black chestnut.
Aidan, I've got written down from what I thought you said, vermilion and white dilute for the red warming up. Did you mean vermilion
No,
and
vermilion
yellow?
yellow, yeah.
I thought it was odd at the time.
Yeah, so
Don't
it's,
worry, I'll send you.
okay.
How do we know if we need to put the layer of yellow?
Yeah, if it looks just a bit too pallid.
For example.
Yeah, that's certainly it.
Yeah? Yes.
It has to be really quite dilute, because if you make it too strong, then you've lost all that work virtually. You're sort of back to your membrane almost.
So before I start doing anything now, I should...
I would build up the second to last layer